What's a secret you will take to the grave, but don't mind telling on the internet? Story 1. So, my grandfather had a hand in making one of the World Series trophies back in the day. He never got any credit, but we have photos and parts from his prototype. When I was a teen, I added what I knew to Wikipedia. Since, why not? Although I believe it's gone now, funny story, I ended up being quoted in newspapers all over the country. Fast forward a few years, and I get a call from my mom, who was almost in tears of joy. She had found that wiki page and was freaking out. She was so happy he finally got credit. She ended up making really fancy shadow boxes of the printed wiki page, copies of the photos, and other baseball stuff. She made one for each of her siblings. I've had to just bite my tongue every time I go over there and see that thing hanging prominently in the living room. Story 2. Once, when I was 13, I went a week and a half without using the bathroom. I was on a camping trip, and something must have happened with the drinking water or my digestion. I took laxatives. Nothing worked. My stomach was killing me, but nothing would come out. Then, one evening after dinner, I felt it coming. I knew this was it. I bolted for the bathhouse, mentally preparing for the epic event. When I finally waddled in, the stalls were all occupied. At this point, I'm freaking out. I'm literally about to have an accident in the woods, with no way to clean up. I waddled to the private shower attached to the bathrooms, and my desperate mind starts solving problems like I'm a genius in a movie. Initially, I thought to just go in the shower drain and try to stomp it through, but I was not going to be that person who ruined the nicest shower in the woods for everyone. Like a bolt of lightning, I knew what I had to do. So I used the only piece of clothing I could spare, my sock. Obviously, my stomach was doing better now, and I was hugely relieved. I brought the sock to the dumpster nearby, and one of my friends saw me on the way. Before I could dispose of it, he struck up a conversation and started asking questions about what I was doing. Internally, I was panicking. The best excuse I could come up with was that I found a sock in the shower stuffed with mud, so I thought it best to throw it away. My friend affirmed how good of a guy I was for doing that. I threw the sock into the dumpster, and my problems were finally over. Mud in a sock is a ridiculous story, but there's absolutely no way he could have guessed that the real situation was much, much more bizarre. I've never told a soul about this until now. Never will again. Story 3. When I was an awkward tween, my brothers and I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house. We had been raised by my grandparents since we were little kids. Even after my dad remarried, he and my stepmom both worked the night shift. So we would stay over at my grandparents' house while my parents were at work. One day, my grandmother told me it was my grandfather's birthday and suggested that I wish him a happy birthday. He was downstairs in the living room, sitting on the sofa, and I went up to him, gave him a big hug around the neck, and said, "Happy birthday, Grandpa." It was kind of difficult to hug a person sitting down, so I ended up kneeling on the sofa between his legs, rather than trying to hug him from a standing position. He was quite happy and gave me a hug back. When I pulled away, he held me in his arms and gave me a big smile. And then he kissed me in a way that wasn't appropriate. Sometimes, when I was a little kid, we would kiss family members on the mouth, but those were just quick, harmless pecks. I could tell immediately that this was different. It lasted only for a moment, and I was grossed out and confused when I pulled away. At that moment, my grandmother walked into the living room. I turned my head to look at her. My hands were still on my grandfather's shoulders. She seemed really happy that I had wished him a happy birthday, like a good little kid. I gave him a final quick hug and left the room quickly. For the rest of my tween and teen years, I was always careful not to be alone in the same room with my grandfather. He passed away during my 20s, a good decade ahead of his time due to health issues, and my family chose me to speak at his funeral. I had really complicated feelings about it, because I did love him. My grandma and grandpa raised me after all. Also, my grandfather was the rock of the family. And after he passed away, the three branches, my dad and our family, plus his siblings and their families, gradually grew apart. Nothing was ever the same between us again. We don't even spend Christmas all together anymore. I've never told anyone in my family about this because I couldn't break my grandmother's heart. She survived her husband by 10 years and still talks to and about him every day and visits his grave multiple times a week. Story 4. My dad cheated on my mom and invited the person over when I was 9. She was a severely overweight woman, and my dad is also quite overweight. My parents were fighting but trying to work things out. They slept in separate rooms at that point. Earlier that day, I had jumped on his bed and broke the board supporting it on the bed frame. I wasn't allowed to do this and always got in trouble for that reason. My mom noticed something was off. She could tell my dad had company because she smoked, and the scent lingered in the house. She asked if I had jumped on the bed. I said no. I was afraid I'd get in trouble. I was surprised there was no follow-up trying to prove my guilt. Years later, I remembered why she asked and realized that my lie basically confirmed that my dad had used the bed, likely for something more than sleeping. I'm sure he did, and that lie may have been what got him kicked out of the house. Story 5. I was assaulted with an object in the youth room of my childhood church by my two best friends at the time. We were basically alone in the building. One of them did it, and the other held me down. They thought it was a joke, something funny, even when I started screaming. One of them had a moment of realization, I suppose, and made the other stop. They sat with me for a few minutes until I had calmed down. Once I managed to stand up, I hit one of them between the legs with a pool cue. Their parents were waiting in the parking lot, and they threatened to call the police on me, until my friend admitted to what had happened. I was pressured into silence by the pastor at the request of their parents. I've told people, so I guess it's not technically a secret, but nobody's ever believed me, probably because I'm a big guy, and always have been. The last person I tried to tell actually slapped me across the face. So I guess this is something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. Story 6. You know those stories about girls in the 70s who went to live with an aunt for a year during high school? I did that. In 2008. I was a very naive teenager with irregular periods, and my friend thought it would be absolutely hilarious to buy those cheap pregnancy tests from Walmart and see what happened. We laughed the whole time until one of them came back positive. We couldn't remember which was which, so we bought 2 more. Turns out, it was mine. That was the moment it truly hit me that I had been pregnant. My school didn't offer any kind of education, and my parents were completely unhelpful. I panicked and made my friend promise not to tell anyone. I basically put it out of my mind until my clothes stopped fitting. I was always close with my older cousin, and one night during a phone call, she asked how school was going. I ended up dumping the whole story on her. She came up with the perfect plan. It was already April, and when I finally got the courage to go to Planned Parenthood, they told me I was due in August. So my cousin called my mom, saying there was an amazing summer music program in her town that I just had to attend, and that I could stay with her the entire time. My mom thought it sounded great, and the day after school ended, I got on a plane to San Francisco. I stayed with my cousin. She took me to all of my appointments, helped me find a social worker, and eventually helped me connect with my daughter's adoptive parents. When I got home just before my junior year started, my mom asked how my summer was, without really caring, and remarked that I must have lost a few pounds. My cousin died in a car accident in 2012, and no one else knows except that one friend, the doctors I saw in Oakland, and the people involved in the adoption. I get a photo and a letter about the child once a year, and I send money for her college and a birthday card every year. When she turns 16, her parents are allowed to give her the cards, if she wants them, but they're not permitted to share any contact information. I have no interest in meeting her or getting to know her personally. I just want to know she's safe and cared for. That's all I've ever wanted. I will take this story with me to the grave, and if my friend ever reveals it, I'll deny everything. Story 7. I attempted to hurt my mother. She was abusive, both verbally and physically. She'd hit you in places no one would see or rip clumps of my hair out when Dad was on the road for work. She probably has a personality disorder. One night, she got in my face when I was coming home from my second job, and I had reached my breaking point. My mom went through long periods where she wouldn't work. Meanwhile, I was working over 50 hours every summer to pay family bills in my parents' names and also get my younger sister to all of her activities. I was done. I snapped. I tried to push my mom's head through a wall. She started screaming, "Help! Help!" And I told her that if she could dish it out, she should be able to take it. I shoved her to the ground and kicked her repeatedly in the abdomen and thigh, still trying to push her head against the wall with one hand. It was a plaster and lath situation, an old house in New England. I really hurt her, and honestly, it felt like releasing years of built-up pain. She's caused so much damage to people and never faced any consequences. No one in our family ever helped me or called the police when she hurt me. The only one who ever intervened was our dog. If the dog was awake when my mom tried to start something, she'd get between us and growl until my mom backed off. I had always shown restraint, never touched her, until that night. But when I crossed the line, my dad called the cops on me. The police arrived and separated us to ask questions. I explained what happened and blurted out, "Where were you when I was 8 and she was doing that to me?" One of the officers looked taken aback. I think he could tell I was being honest and that it was the result of years of trauma. He went to his partner and said, "I don't think this is an assault. I think it's a mental health crisis." They talked to my parents and basically pressured them into agreeing. The officers insisted this was a medical issue, not a criminal one. So they called an ambulance, and I was taken to the hospital as part of a diversion program. I spent 3 days in detox and walked out with no charges, no record, just a prescription for Prozac and a therapy referral covered by the state insurance program. That night probably saved my life. I got real help through CBT and DBT therapy. But I don't tell people. Who would want to date me? Who would promote me at work? Just be kind. You never know what someone's been through, or what someone's capable of when they've been pushed too far. Story 8. Seems like a good time as any to tell this story. When I was a teenager, my parents were divorced but lived within walking distance of each other. I would often walk back and forth between their homes for various reasons. I got to know a family that lived in the house on the corner of the block where my mom lived. One day, as I was walking past their house, I noticed a wallet on the ground. I picked it up and opened it. I saw that the address on the ID matched the house on the corner. It belonged to the mother of the family, a very kind woman. Being a teenager, I took the money out of the wallet, about $50. Then I returned to the house and gave the wallet back, explaining I had found it down the street. The mother was relieved and very grateful. What's always stuck with me is that a few weeks later, I passed their house again like I often did, and the woman stopped me. She wanted to thank me again for returning the wallet and handed me a $50 bill. I tried to refuse, but she insisted. I was rewarded for stealing. While it's not a big secret, it's something I've never really had the heart to tell anyone. I still think about it often for some reason. Story 9. Speaking of graves, when I was a teenager, some friends and I got really stoned and walked around the town cemetery. There was a whole section of flat grave markers from the 1800s. I found myself imagining the lives of those people who had once lived in the same town I now did. Then I saw one of the plates sticking up, kind of crooked. I bent down to touch it, and it wasn't even attached. I lifted it up in my hand, and right then, in a haze of bad teenage judgment, I put it in my backpack. I told myself I'd somehow honor this stranger more than the careless groundskeeper who had left it like that in the middle of the path. None of my friends saw what I did. Hours later, once I was sober, the guilt hit me hard. I hid the grave plate in my closet for about a year before I eventually threw it back over the cemetery fence late one night. I hope Bessie Jane Holmes doesn't mind that I held onto her nameplate for a while. I still think back and shudder at the guilt of such disrespectful stupidity. Story 10. I've really enjoyed reading these, so I thought I'd share mine. It's a bit of a read, but it's funny. I had just finished surgery and had a post-op appointment with my doctor up the hill. On the drive up, I felt the urge to go to the bathroom. I figured I'd use the restroom at the office. I somehow forgot that I needed to go. Strange as it sounds. Anyway, I drove back down the hill, and that's when the urge hit like a freight train. I pulled over to the side of the highway. With no bathroom in sight, I grabbed the only thing nearby, a thin, empty styrofoam box from Panda Express on the passenger seat. Things were moving fast. So fast, in fact, that I made my first mistake. I missed the box. I had now gone all over the driver's seat. I had been on antibiotics too, so it wasn't solid. More like a mud pie or split pea soup consistency. It filled the seat. I was trying not to sit back in it while acrobatically moving around in my car. I managed to open the door, grabbed my phone, and popped the trunk. After slamming the car door shut, important detail, I ran bare-bottomed to the trunk to grab a change of clothes I had thankfully left there. Good thing I hadn't made that Goodwill run yet. But the situation wasn't over. I returned to the driver's door and realized my keys were locked inside the car, with the engine still running. So now I had to call a tow truck to unlock my car door. And of course, the tow truck guy shows up and is greeted by the disaster I left on the driver's seat. I was mortified. He just stared at me with total confusion. I looked at him, hung my head, and said, "It's exactly what it looks like." I'm sure that guy had one heck of a story to tell when he got home. Story 11. I don't know how to word this, but considering it'll be toward the bottom, I don't think it'll get much attention anyway. But I just want to vent. I'm a guy, second-year college student. I'm friends with a lot of girls. Literally, I'm the dad of my dorm because I act like one and look out for everyone. A girl, a very close friend I made this year, told me she was assaulted years ago by an ex. The thing is, she's not the only one. Basically, every girl I become friends with has a similar story. Some awful experience involving someone who hurt them. A girl from last year was assaulted and actually contracted a disease from the person who did it. Now she has to tell every guy she likes about it, and they almost always leave afterward, which leaves her heartbroken. It kills me. Every time I see them, I hug them a little tighter. I worry about them constantly, and it saddens me that it doesn't stop with them. I haven't told anyone their stories, mainly because they told me out of trust, but it makes me wish I could do more. Even just as their friend, I wish I could absorb their pain with each hug and carry it myself so they didn't have to. I'll never tell anybody else what they've shared with me. They trusted me for a reason. I just wish I knew what to do, because I know eventually I'll be told another story by the next girl, and all I can really do is hug her and be there. So yeah, thanks for reading this, strangers. I don't know if it really fits the post, but I wanted to vent a bit. It took a weight off my chest to finally say something, since I can't say it anywhere else. Story 12. I started taking a lot of Adderall in 9th grade. I had 3 people who would regularly give me their pills because they didn't want them. I was dumb and didn't really know what it was. I just wanted drugs. Turns out, I loved it. My grades suddenly went up. I was happier and easier to be around. My relationship with my parents started to get better since I was acting like a normal kid. My parents were the type to never put their kids on any kind of behavioral medication, though, and my relationship with them wasn't great, so I couldn't bring it up. All three of the people giving it to me stopped within a few days of each other. I had massive withdrawal, which at the time didn't occur to me. I just thought I was super depressed for no reason. I was incredibly aggressive. My grades nosedived, and my relationship with my parents went downhill again as they punished me for my bad attitude. I only put it all together a few years ago. Kinda interesting. Story 13. Back in high school, I had a baseball teammate who didn't see eye to eye with me on almost everything. We were the best players on the team, so for the sake of team unity, we both kept our mouths shut and just played ball. Junior year, we committed to universities in the same conference. I heard during my freshman year of college that he had been saying some really unflattering things about my family, from a reliable friend who attended the same school as him. That was the tipping point. So I paid our starting pitcher, I played shortstop, $100 to hit this kid in the head when he came up to bat. Well, my pitcher friend did it. He hit the kid in the back of the head with a 92.4 miles per hour fastball. The guy was knocked unconscious and rushed to the hospital. This happened this past spring, and now the kid can't play sports anymore. He has to wear a hat and sunglasses outdoors, and he eventually had to drop out of school because he couldn't keep up academically. Honestly, I feel like a complete jerk now. I've never told anyone I was behind it. I started as a freshman shortstop, batted third, and played great. But if my coach or athletic director ever found out, I'd be cut immediately, taking that one to at least graduation. Story 14. When I was 20, I was dating a man who was my first love, my first boyfriend, my first kiss, the person who took my virginity, etc. 3 months into the relationship, I found out he was married to someone I worked with. But even knowing that, I still loved him and felt like I could do no better. I was overweight and very insecure, and I ended up sleeping with him a few more times after I found out. One day, it was like a switch flipped in my head. I suddenly felt ashamed and full of regret, and I stopped seeing him altogether. I prayed to God for forgiveness every day. Even though it happened over 5 years ago, I still feel really bad. He passed away 3 years ago. Story 15. I nearly injured someone seriously with a bow and arrow. I was in the forest with my friends, and I had taken my dad's bow and arrow because I wanted to learn how to use it. My friends were telling me to fire the arrow into the sky. So I did. About 5 seconds later, we heard someone screaming in pain. I dropped the bow and ran with my friends to see what happened. The next thing I saw was a man with an arrow in his foot. It kind of looked like that scene from Grown-Ups when they played the arrow game. Anyway, the man told me to call an ambulance, which I did. Later, the police and an ambulance showed up. I ran back to the bow and buried it under some leaves and dirt. Anyway, my friends and I got away with it, and my dad never knew his bow and arrow were gone. We all swore never to talk about it again. Story 16. My mom died from breast cancer. She also had MS, diagnosed shortly after I was born. She ended up passing away because she had cancerous fluid building up in her lungs, and the chemo and radiation stopped working. At that point, they were basically just killing her alongside the cancer. We spent a week in the hospital with her before she died. I cried so much that I'm surprised I'm still able to cry. There are 2 things I can never tell my family. First, I'm not upset that she died. She suffered so much that I'm genuinely glad she finally found peace and isn't in pain anymore. When I miss her, when I cry because she's gone, it's always for selfish reasons. Like, I'm sad, and she's not here to hold me. Or I don't know what to do, and I wish she could be here to help. It's rarely just about her being gone, because when I think about her still being alive, I can't help but remember how badly she suffered. I wouldn't want her to go through that again. Second, my mom's illness and death have made me decide that I will never treat the cancer I know I'm likely to get. Unless it's really easy to treat, and I'll be fine, I'm not going through that. Knowing my luck, it'll be some stage 80 softball-sized tumors all over my most important organs, and I'll get a few hours to say goodbye. So yeah, I'm just going to let it happen. I don't want chemo or radiation. I don't want to lose my independence or spend years sick and immobile only to die anyway. I'll take 4 months of peace and acceptance. Thank you. Bonus secret. I'm really mad at my 2 older siblings because my mom was able to see them graduate, but she died 2 years before I graduated high school. It's super petty, but it makes me so angry. I loved my mom so much, and I wish she could have been there for at least one good thing I did with my life. My dad literally said to my middle sister, "At least she got to see you graduate, right in front of me." What a cruel, abusive jerk. Sorry, I just have a lot of pent-up rage. Story 17. I'm great at lying, and no, this post isn't a lie. To the point where I'm not even sure what's true anymore. It's helped me a lot in life, and honestly, there's been no real downside. I have a great job working for a sports radio station as a producer for their afternoon drive show. It's legitimately my dream job, working in sports broadcasting. You'd think I must have a strong college degree, right? Nope. I'm just confident and good at selling myself. I dropped out of community college because I had to work to support myself. My employer thinks I graduated from a 4-year school because that's what I told them. When we discuss college sports, I just say my school didn't have great teams, they didn't, or none at all. For context, I did work at my college radio station, recorded music for friends' bands, and produce a podcast for a friend. So, I'm absolutely qualified. I just learned a lot on the fly. I've been lying to my current girlfriend for a while now, but that's kind of been the pattern. I lied to my ex of 4 years, and to another ex before her. But none of them left because of the lies. They just think my past was a lot more impressive than it really was. I work out a lot now, and I'm proud of my body. In high school, I was super skinny. But my past 3 girlfriends and co-workers think I was a volleyball, track, and baseball star. The truth is, I quit baseball at 16 and never played the others. It's believable because of what I do now: rock climbing and amateur wrestling. Anyway, there's more. I'm sitting here eating lunch and thinking about all the different stories different friends and family members believe about me. Do I get caught? Sometimes. Do I fix that with more lies? You bet. Basically, my life is fabricated. I have an awesome life, an amazing girlfriend, my perfect job, great friends, and a great family. I still lie, though. I guess because it's fun. I don't regret a single one. And no, my lies aren't to hurt people. Not about cheating or stealing. Just things to hype up situations and myself. Story 18. As a teenage boy, I was taken advantage of by a woman. A woman who was aggressive and manipulative. As someone with autism, I wasn't great at picking up social cues, and this woman tricked me into thinking she was going to take me to see a girl I had a crush on. I lived across the street from the high school and just across the river from the library. She saw me walking out of my driveway and attached herself to me, at first saying she was that girl, and later that she would take me to see her at the library. She basically bullied me into following her by taking advantage of the fact that I was too polite to say no. She became increasingly touchy as we walked and eventually tried to corner me in the library. Then she claimed to know the girl's phone number and convinced me to go to my house to call her from there. I remember hearing a story about Rupert Grint being too nice and ending up stuck at someone's house for dinner. Non-Sewell, but similar in vibe, and I can relate. There's a scene in The Big Bang Theory where Penny asks Leonard why he had ES with another woman while they were broken up. His response was, "Because she let me." And, frankly, that sums up almost all of my teenage Sewell experiences. I was incredibly passive. She was someone I found very unattractive. I'm sad it happened the way it did. I was in the middle of a huge growth spurt, going from 5 feet 6 inches to 6 feet 2 inches in one summer. And I was still awkward and not yet athletic. Just your typical geeky teen. I was incredibly hormonal and wouldn't find out I had autism until I was 40 years old. Even though it was clearly wrong, I kept the experience to myself for years. I didn't think of it as assault, I just thought it was bad S. And as a teenager, I thought bad S wasn't really a thing. I didn't understand why I wasn't aroused or why nothing worked physically during the experience. She got frustrated and eventually just did what she wanted and left. I didn't tell anyone. In the toxic masculinity culture I grew up in, that situation was seen as a failure on my part. Because, supposedly, young men should be ready to go at all times. For many years, I never even learned that men could be victims. I was told it wasn't possible. There are so many mixed messages in this world around S. People should be taught consent early, for everyone's protection. Some people want assertive partners, sure, but even then, consent matters. It's overwhelming for a confused 16-year-old boy with no good role models, especially with autism making everything more difficult. I didn't realize it was assault until about 5 years ago. I had been raised to believe that all S was good S, or at least that it was always a win if it happened. Sadly, many guys learn about S from equally clueless friends. I was no different. That mindset even contributed to my own confusion in later years about how to hear no, how to understand what was wanted or not, and how to approach intimacy respectfully. It wasn't until I reached my 30s that I completely restructured my understanding of S and relationships. Now, I can't even consider intimacy unless I know the other person is fully present, fully informed, and completely consenting. Honestly, unless someone is direct with me, I won't even recognize interest. All of this explains why I kept quiet about it for so long. I didn't have the tools to understand what happened. And I didn't think I was allowed to talk about it. Thinking back, I realize I was also scared that I had hurt others in later experiences, because I didn't understand what real consent looked like. I'm saying all this because the way society treats these issues, especially for men, is harmful. Education and conversations about consent, values, and healthy intimacy should be a priority. It takes uncomfortable growth to get there. I had to unlearn so many unhealthy fantasies and ideas just to understand myself and others in a healthy way. Story 19. I nearly killed someone once. It was a complete accident. I was harassed at a train station late at night as a 15-year-old girl. 2 girls, much bigger and older than me, randomly cornered me and started insulting me and my family. After about 15 minutes of hearing their constant trash talk, I saw my train approaching in the distance. I moved away from them toward the edge of the platform so I could get on the train more quickly. They tried to block me and made some insult. I don't even remember exactly what it was. Something about me needing to apologize for being something. I punched one of them in the face as hard as I could, full of rage. But even then, the punch wasn't very strong. I had no strength or training. The girl I hit stumbled backward and just kept stumbling for over 6 meters. She nearly fell off the edge of the platform. The train arrived just as she almost went over. If she had fallen, she might have ended up between the train and the platform, or under the train altogether, all because of one measly punch. There were no witnesses, no cameras. I bolted. I ran. To this day, I've only told people that I was harassed that night and ran away. Never that I was almost responsible for someone's death. I doubt anyone would even believe me if I told them. Story 20. My husband died by suicide. My young children don't know, and I will take that secret to my grave. In the weeks leading up to it, he was withdrawn and difficult. Angry outbursts, mood swings. After punching a hole through a desk over a failed GTA heist, I told him he needed to get help. He then threatened me. I told him therapy or divorce, and if he threatened me again, I would call the police. He went to one therapy appointment and one group anger management session. After that, he declared himself cured. He was a stay-at-home dad for our 4 young children. On the day he died, he completely lost it on our 6-year-old for having an accident on the way to the bathroom. He threw our child down the stairs into a closet. Immediately after, he went into the garage and took his own life. I received a text that read, "I'm sorry. I'm mentally gone. I was at work, 2 hours away." He didn't respond to any of my messages or calls. When I finally got home and opened the garage, I found him. The kids were locked inside the house, terrified, and had been trying to break into the garage. They only saw the ladder. All they know is that Daddy went into the garage and had an accident. That's all they'll ever know. I will never tell them the truth, because they would internalize it. They'd think it was their fault. There is already enough trauma from losing their father, especially considering how he acted during his final moments. There is no way I will add to that pain by letting them carry even a shred of blame. Mental illness and suicide are hard enough for adults to understand. I will carry this burden alone, for them. Story 21. I have 2 stories, both involving my mom. My mom used to run a food business, specifically, she made pudding. We partnered briefly with La Caquerie. Yes, that La Caquerie, the one that won Cupcake Wars and got a wave of fame. Eventually, my mom had to shut the business down because it was draining money from our family. A man who claimed to be a restaurant owner and who said he was friends with the La Caquerie owner offered to help her move and sell the equipment. Fast forward sometime later. I'm with my mom in the garage, and she's unpacking the equipment, only to realize that half of it is missing. She later finds out the man wasn't actually a restaurant owner. One day, she forces her way into his kitchen, and there it all is. Her stolen equipment, being used. Turns out, the guy and La Caquerie's owner were in on it together. Their plan was to take the equipment and sell it for profit. But my mom took back all of it, and they ended up losing money on the scheme. Jason Heisley, La Caquerie's public face and pastry chef, was disgusted by what happened. Tired of being pushed around by the owner and not being allowed to innovate, he left. He now owns his own cupcake shop called Cake by Jason Heisley, and it's great. My mom decided to have me and my twin at a hospital she was unsure about. It had recently been renovated and had a number of Russian-speaking staff, which made her more comfortable at the time. But when my twin sister was born, none of her organs were functioning. I had taken all the blood in utero, and she was born essentially unresponsive. The hospital staff did nothing until my mom started screaming at them to act. Miraculously, most of my sister's organs began functioning, but not her kidneys. That's when Johns Hopkins stepped in to help. My mom tried to sue the hospital, but no lawyer would take her case. Eventually, a friend gave her the number for one of the best lawyers in the state. He dug deep and proved that the hospital had failed to follow protocol in several areas. The hospital tried to shift blame onto my mom, claiming she had done something wrong during the pregnancy, but it didn't hold up. She won the case. Now, my sister's future college fund is from that lawsuit. She eventually got a kidney transplant, and today, she's doing great. Story 22. My wife and I took my little sister out for a birthday lunch. She had just turned 13. She was, and still is, a strict vegetarian because she loves animals. She ordered a pasta dish that normally came with chicken, but asked to substitute it with a meatless tofu option. She was about a quarter of the way through her meal when she started freaking out, insisting that the restaurant had used real chicken instead of tofu. I looked at it and immediately recognized it was chicken. I took a bite. Yep, definitely chicken. But I told her to calm down and assured her it was tofu. She asked if I was sure, and I told her she had probably forgotten what real chicken tasted like since it had been so long. I said the texture and flavor were completely different from meat, and what she was eating didn't taste anything like actual chicken. She thanked me and ate every single bite of her lunch. 12 years later, my wife and I still laugh about it, but we vowed never to tell her the truth. Story 23. When I was 12, I started at a new school. The very first girl I met, we'll call her Kay, was the first person to make me feel welcomed. I'm a guy, for reference. She quickly became my best friend. Fast forward 10 years. I was madly in love with her and never told her. She broke up with a guy who had no direction in life and then met someone new. She moved away to Maine and we drifted apart. So much so that we eventually stopped talking completely. I knew she was the one I wanted to marry. I was sure we'd be together forever. But I couldn't bring myself to tell her how I felt. I never told her how much she truly meant to me. And now, she's gone. She's engaged to the guy from Maine. She's been gone a year now, and I still think of her often. I genuinely believe she was my soulmate. I've never felt the same since she left. So, Kay, if by some crazy chance you're reading this, I love you. More than I could ever put into words. That's what I'll take to my grave. Story 24. I might be a bit late, but when I was 15 and on drugs, I slit my wrist after assaulting my mother in front of my sister. From the beginning, my girlfriend at the time came over once everyone in the house had gone to sleep so we could be together. We ended up falling asleep. Around 5 a.m., we woke up to realize my family was already awake. My mom starts work around 4:30 a.m. She works from home, so my girlfriend had to hide under my bed until I got home later that day. I grabbed some snacks for her before school, including sweet Hawaiian rolls. Important later. When I got home, she was still hiding under the bed. My mom didn't suspect anything, and my girlfriend left shortly after I returned. Later that day, my mom started yelling, asking where the Hawaiian rolls had gone. I told her I didn't know. Maybe my sister took them. She kept shouting and eventually accused me of stashing them under my bed. That turned into a huge fight. She screamed that I was always lying and hiding things. I stormed out of the house for about 10 minutes to cool off. When I came back, she was still furious. I lost control. I ripped the metal screen door off and threw it into the yard, screaming and yelling. We got in each other's faces, and when she bumped me slightly, I completely snapped. I hit her over and over, until she had bruises and was almost unconscious, right in front of my 7-year-old sister. The moment I saw the pain in both of their eyes, I felt like I couldn't live with myself. I went to the kitchen, pulled a steak knife from the block, and slashed my wrist open, cutting down to the bone and severing all 5 tendons. Blood was everywhere. My mom called 911 and used a tourniquet to stop me from bleeding out. After they took me to the hospital, my mom and grandmother had to mop blood off the floor and cabinets for hours. It haunts me to this day, the pain I caused my family over Hawaiian rolls. Story 25. I almost froze to death at a music festival in my tent. I'll never tell my mom how serious it really was. She'd be heartbroken. It started when I bought drinks for my friend, but then I lost him in the crowd. Not wanting to waste the drinks, I decided to drink them myself. I was already drunk, and those extra double vodka Red Bulls pushed me over the edge. The rest is a blur. Just scattered memories of lying down in random spots and a few strange photos with strangers on my phone. The next thing I remember is waking up in my tent, outside of my sleeping bag, wearing just a t-shirt and shaking uncontrollably. I couldn't move. That was the scariest part. I tried to call out to my friend, mumbling the best I could. Thankfully, he heard me and rushed in. A few minutes later, medics carried my barely responsive body across the campsite into the medical tent. I'm still not sure if it was the alcohol or the cold, or both. The medics took my blood 3 times, but nothing came out. They told me that's what happens when your body starts pulling blood to your vital organs to survive extreme cold. After about half an hour, I was stable enough to leave. I haven't mentally recovered from it. I told my mom I drank too much and went to my tent because I got cold. But honestly, if I hadn't woken up when I did, I don't think I would have woken up at all. Story 26. When I was 7 years old, my father took me to a lake to go fishing. This lake had a larger area where people could buy ice cream and snacks, and there were public restrooms nearby. While the shops were closed for the day, the bathrooms remained open. I told my dad I needed to use the restroom, so he let me go by myself. It was about a 3-minute walk from where we were fishing. When I got there, I saw a group of teenagers, 2 girls and 3 boys, hanging out near the restroom area. I walked in, and all but one of them followed me inside. They were laughing and goofing off, but what happened next was something that scarred me deeply. The 2 girls held me down while 2 of the boys assaulted me. The 3rd boy just stood there, watching. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I didn't understand what was happening at the time, only that I was terrified and in pain. After it was over, one of the girls looked me in the eye and said that if I told anyone, they would hurt my dad. I was in complete shock and shame. I didn't even know how to process what had just happened, so I told my dad I had fallen and that my backside hurt, but it was no big deal. I've held this inside for 22 years. This is the first time I've ever said anything about it. Ever since then, I've struggled with dark thoughts. I've had a hard time trusting people, especially teenage girls, and sometimes catch myself harboring intense, irrational resentment. It's something I'm still working through. I've never shared this with anyone close to me. Writing it down here is the first step. Story 27. One summer when I was 12, my parents sent me to a Jewish summer camp in Colorado. I'm Jewish, and this was supposed to be a meaningful experience, but I absolutely hated it. My parents had recently divorced, and I had been stress eating a lot. I'd gained around 35 pounds in a year and was struggling with my self-esteem. The camp itself was physically intense. We went mountain climbing in the Rockies, which was cool, but I'm from Tennessee, and I spent nearly the entire month dealing with altitude sickness. We had to swim across a lake, and I was still adjusting to my new body. The mountain trip involved 4 days of camping in the rain. Setting up and breaking down tents in wet gear was exhausting. On top of that, I had my bar mitzvah coming up, so I had brought a tape recorder to practice my Torah portion. It was just a lot to deal with all at once. Now, my family never kept kosher. We were Reformed Jews, meaning we weren't very strict about food rules. I regularly ate bacon, shellfish, and mixed dairy with meat, but the camp food was strictly kosher, and I think that dramatic change in diet gave me terrible stomach problems for weeks. Then came the fun surprise. An overnight camping trip 2 hours away from the main camp to see the stars. For dinner, we had hobo packs, foil wrapped around ground beef and vegetables, cooked over a campfire. As everyone sat around the fire, I felt it coming. Fast. I didn't even have time to say anything. I ran into the woods and barely made it in time before I lost all control. It hit my calves, socks, shoes, everything. I was mortified. I cleaned myself up the best I could, took off my underwear and socks, and tossed them into the woods in a panic. Then I froze in horror. My underwear had caught on a tree branch, and I remembered my mom had written my name on the tag of every pair. There was no way I could reach it. Knowing they'd come looking for me soon, I left it and returned to the campfire covered in shame. I told them I had thrown up and might have food poisoning. I hoped the smell could somehow pass for that instead. They radioed a counselor to drive me back. Another 2-hour ride. I sat in that vehicle covered in camp food and regret, still pretending to be sick. Eventually, I showered and went to sleep. But that night has haunted me ever since. Somewhere in the Colorado woods, there's probably still a pair of underwear with my name on it, hanging from a tree. And no one ever found out what really happened. Story 28. I lost my scholarship at my university for about a year before recently getting it back, and nobody, not my family, not my friends, not even my girlfriend at the time, ever knew. I couldn't face the shame it would bring me, so I decided to fake it until I made it. I was forced to work at a call center to cover my tuition and personal expenses about a year after starting university. I just couldn't balance work, school, and personal life at all. My grades dropped significantly, and not long after, I lost my 50% scholarship at a very expensive private university. I managed to forge documents to make it look like my grades were still decent. I paid more of my tuition out of pocket so that my mom wouldn't get suspicious. I saved a lot of money from work and eventually quit to focus solely on my studies. I paid off my school fees in secret for an entire year and reapplied for the scholarship as if nothing had ever happened. Just recently, I got it back, and no one ever found out. Story 29. When I was around 11, I went through a phase where I struggled with kleptomania. I would go to friends' houses, or my parents' friends' homes, and go through their belongings. Mostly, it was jewelry. Growing up, my parents didn't buy me jewelry because I had a habit of losing things. So, being the impulsive kid I was, I started stealing. I couldn't help myself. I would always take something small or insignificant, like a single pair of earrings, maybe a necklace, something that looked forgotten or rarely worn. It ended after I stole from my mom's friend. Around that same time, her boyfriend robbed her as well. The situation escalated, and we went to the police. I testified, but I never admitted what I had done. When I got home, I threw away everything I had ever stolen. I've never stolen anything again in my life, and I'll take that secret to my grave. Story 30. I've struggled with emotional and anger problems for most of my life. I'm bipolar. I have ADHD, things like that. Since first grade, I've been part of a folk dancing group. There was this girl in the group who basically acted like she was in charge. She wasn't the oldest, she was 16, but no one ever questioned her. She did and said whatever she wanted. Whenever I talked to my friends about anything, she would make the meanest comments, completely unrelated, just pure negativity. If I didn't follow her instructions exactly, she would hit me in the neck so hard I couldn't move for a bit. It hurt terribly. No one stepped in, not a single person. I was 10 years old at the time. Eventually, I snapped. After one of those times she hit me, I said, "Just because you're a girl doesn't mean you can hit a boy for no reason and get away with it." Her response? "Of course I can, and I will. What are you going to do about it?" I lost it. I pushed her with everything I had. She fell. Just to be clear, I was about 70 pounds, and she was 140. As she hit the ground, I grabbed her hair and slammed her head against the concrete. About 10 times. Then I stood up and spit on her. Everyone saw, and this time, no one did anything to help her. She was taken to the hospital. Later, I found out I had displaced and fractured her jaw, nearly damaged her vision, broken her nose, and knocked out 6 teeth. Her face was completely unrecognizable. I don't regret it. Story 31. My stepdad was loud, aggressive, and, honestly, a terrible person. He was the kind of guy who took The Sopranos a little too seriously and had a disturbingly passionate relationship with his Corvette. Nothing inappropriate that I know of, but he clearly loved that car more than he loved my mom, and probably more than his own kids. He was always yelling, screaming awful things at my sister and mom. They cried a lot because of the things he said or did. I remember staring at the knife block on the counter and fantasizing about doing something drastic, just to make the yelling and chaos stop. I never acted on those thoughts, but they were real. Then one day, when I was 16, I snapped. He was out in his other car, and I was home alone. I grabbed a handful of large rocks and threw them through the windows of his Corvette. I tore into that car with every ounce of rage I had built up over the years. I destroyed it. Once the adrenaline wore off, I realized what I had done, and panicked. I bolted to a friend's house across town and told them everything, just in case my parents asked. But no one else ever found out. I think he knew it was me, but I had an airtight alibi, and he couldn't prove anything. I never heard from him again after he left my mom, and good riddance. I still get angry when I think about the things he put us through. Story 32. A friend of mine had the worst kind of helicopter parents. They planned every detail of his life, what he studied, who he would marry, everything. The pressure was intense. His parents made the Lannisters look like the Huxtables. I tried to convince him to stand up for himself, but he never could. They even sent him to a top-tier university, hoping he'd become something prestigious. But the distance didn't help. They still found ways to control him. So when he disappeared, I wasn't surprised. I was worried, of course, but I understood why he might run. What I didn't expect was the private investigator his parents hired to track him down. The guy hounded me for weeks. He even waited outside my apartment once. I had to call the police and file a complaint. Then his father showed up, completely unhinged, and confronted me and a few others. Things nearly turned physical. I made it clear. If I ever found out where their son was, I'd never tell them, unless he asked for help. The police were already involved, so I let them do their job. 6 months later, I got a call from my friend. He was alive, and doing better than ever. He thanked me for not saying anything. He told me he'd been on the verge of a breakdown and considered hurting himself. The only thing keeping him going was a friendship with a girl who panhandled near his apartment. She convinced him he had 2 choices: live a life he hated to please his parents, or walk away and start over. She was planning to ride the freight rails to another city and invited him to come along. He said yes. He cashed out what little money he had and left with her. Riding freight trains, making art, living free. He said he eventually fell in love with her. They settled down and built a life together as artists, teaching and taking private commissions. The police found him, but after learning he was an adult who left on his own, they respected his wishes and closed the case. He asked them not to share his location with his parents, and they agreed. I still hear from him occasionally. He's married now, with a family. His parents still don't know where he is, and I'll never tell them. He found happiness on his own terms, and that's all that matters.